season 1 of this virtual arts festival. I'm Harriet Gaffney and I'm the Artistic Director of Portal, and I'm also the Arts Development Officer for the Surf Coast Shire. Before we start today, I'd like to acknowledge the lands on which this session will be held. Portal is brought to you live from the lands of the Wadawurrung and Eastern Maar people of the Kulin Nations. We acknowledge them as the traditional owners and protectors of this place, and we acknowledge their ancestors who cared for the land, rivers and sea and all things living for thousands of generations. We pay our respects to elders past, present and future. So it's sort of a sad moment for me to sort of come to the last of our Sunday morning sessions, but I think it's fabulous that we're sort of closing this first season of Portal off in this way by looking to the future. Where to now? The future of the arts on the Surf Coast. We've spent the last 8 weeks looking back at the history of arts and culture in this place, both through the work of creatives on the Surf Coast and also by looking at the traditional history of the Wadawurrung, how they've used ochre, how they work with the land, etc. We've then moved to the present with our weekends on the Arts Trail and on the Anglesey Bonnet Play Festival and performing arts in our region. And now this weekend, we really have been looking to the future. If you didn't see yesterday's session with the MAC, please have a look at that on our Facebook site. And this afternoon, we'll also be looking at some really innovative projects from East Gippsland. But now I would like to introduce our guests for today's session. The first of our guests and the facilitator is Jason Smith. Jason has been the director of Geelong Gallery since April 2016. He's curated several exhibitions for Geelong, including in 2017, the major survey of renowned Australian painter Fred Williams in the You Yangs. Jason was the initiating curator and member of the international curatorial team for the acclaimed touring exhibition Making Modernism, O'Keeffe, Preston and Cossington Smith. Jason was also previously curatorial manager of Australian art at the Queensland Art Gallery, Gallery of Modern Art. He was the director and CEO of Heide Museum of Modern Art, and he was also the director of Monash Gallery of Art. Jason's bio is very big. I'll keep going. From 1997 to 2007, he was curator of contemporary art at the National Gallery of Victoria. He has individually and collaboratively curated over 50 solo, group and thematic exhibitions, including significant retrospectives of the works of Howard Arkley, Peter Booth, Louise Bourgeois, Gwyn Hanson-Pickett, Stephen Benwell and Kathy Temin. He's written on the works of more than 150 artists for a range of publications, and I am so thrilled that he is going to be facilitating the last of these sessions, because to have someone with that understanding of the arts here to sort of ask some of our key creatives, what they believe the future is, an incredible boon for us. So thank you, Jason. The next of our guests today is Geoffrey Carran. Geoffrey is a well-known artist to many of us here in the Shire. He's dedicated the past decade to painting explorations of Australia's diverse bird population, working in the studio on canvas and outdoors on super-scaled murals. His work focuses on the play between detailed realism and looser painting techniques. Geoffrey uses his public murals to highlight endangered bird species that can be found in the locations of the artworks. Using these murals and the public's interest in street and public art to raise awareness and start conversations about people's connections, memories, and stories about their relationship with our bird life and its importance. He completed his Masters of Fine Arts in 2008 after moving to Australia from New Zealand. Karan's paintings, murals and prints can be found in a diverse array of locations, from recently adorning every room in a newly built 5-star hotel in Melbourne to murals in New York, Istanbul and London. His real passion, however, is for painting public art in regional Australia and expanding technically in the studio. Thanks for being with us, Geoffrey. Helen Gibbins aspires to making serious work, but her subjects often take the lead to create a more whimsical universe of drawings and objects. Since receiving a BA Honours HD in sculpture at RMIT way back when, she's exhibited in solo and group shows, worked in not-for-profit galleries in Melbourne, and co-managed and co-developed the Melbourne International Animation Festival and associated projects for a decade. She's honoured to currently hold the position of President of Surf Coast Arts Inc., a voluntary community-led organisation since 1994 that encourages anyone who is passionate about supporting the local arts to join the committee. Just get in touch, links will be at the end. As a relatively new resident on the coast, Helen believes that there's still so much to learn about the history of the arts in the region. Oh, now I'm about to give myself credit. And she says so enormous praise to the Shire's creative team for developing Portal. I should have probably cut that. To reinvigorate all important conversations and connections, Helen also curates the Instagram account Our Creative Coast, a place to share creative opportunities and the work by artists who reside along the Great West Coast of Victoria. Thanks, Helen, and thanks so much for yesterday as well.
Oh, you're welcome.
Now, the next of our presenters today is Stewart Guthrie. Now, I've had a little creative play in Stewart's bio, so Stu, don't look shocked. Stewart is the creative genius, they're not his words, behind Ashmore Arts, a hub of 20 plus commercial working artists, painters, photographers, weavers, sculptors, pottery makers, furniture makers, illustrators, knife makers, blacksmiths, and public artists based on a beautiful rural property off Grossmans Road in Torquay. While Stewart does not consider himself an artist, he will admit to being a builder of both wonderful studio spaces and, I would suggest, of concepts. Stewart firmly believes there is an arts industry to be unearthed within the Surf Coast Shire, and that's what we're working towards. Finally, our guest today is Daniela Rodriguez. Daniela is a photographer and artist based in Torquay. She's a visual storyteller whose work combines fine art and documentary photography. She's inspired by the people and places that surround her and the connection she has to the community and the natural environment. Her work ranges from fine art photography and community arts projects to art in public spaces. Daniela was born in Chile and grew up in Melbourne. Her passion for photography began over 20 years ago when she studied analog black and white photography, and where she fell in love with the darkroom and the process of manipulating light. She has a Bachelor in Creative Arts Industries and is an alumni of the Emerging Cultural Leaders Program at Footscray Community Arts Centre. This has allowed her to pursue projects investigating community and belonging, as well as community arts development. Since moving to the Surf Coast, Daniela has been influenced by the local culture and has been documenting the stillness and beauty of the everyday along the Surf Coast. She is currently developing a new project in collaboration with Wadawurrung traditional owner, Karina Eccles. Daniela is also on the Surf Coast Arts Space Management Committee, an artist-run initiative based in Anglesea. She's also a member of the Multi-Disciplinary Arts Collective, or the MAC, who've been working towards transforming the old Sport and Rec Centre in Torquay into a performance gallery space for the community. And last but definitely not least is Mark Trinham, who we met way back at the beginning of this series of conversations in July. Mark's a full-time professional artist who's been a resident of the Surf Coast since 1990. He's been involved in many public art installations, exhibitions, events, and festivals. Through his art, Mark aims to bring focus to the natural environment and community, celebrating the spirit of this land through a wide variety of mediums, including sculpture and public art, graphic design and illustration, music, and events organisation. Jason, after that very long series of bios, and my apologies for mixing up the order there, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Harriet. Good morning, everybody. And what a great lineup for this final session of Portal to consider ways forward for arts on the Surf Coast. And I'm especially honoured to be joining the group in this particular discussion because in Geelong, there's quite a bit of work going on at the moment in relation to arts, heritage and culture, both in terms of strategy, but other groups like Creative Geelong who are doing what they can to continually unearth those practitioners who we're not hearing from and whose work needs a broader platform and a wider audience. And as the director of Geelong Gallery, it's very important for me to assert that our arts, heritage and culture communities are widespread and that there are links between us. And some of those links will be teased out today. Geelong has recently undertaken through the council, Geelong Gallery doesn't belong to council, we're an incorporated association, but we have a very special relationship with council. Led by Martin Payton, there was a really interesting advisory panel formed called Geelong COVID Arts Recovery Advisory, which brought together a range of unusual suspects, not the usual institutional or organisational representatives, but a range of practitioners. And it was a very laterally focused group to begin to think through how the city and its region and the region might come out of COVID-19 conditions, led through the creative industries and various practitioners' contributions. So there's a lot of work going on, and just as I'd like to say something about Portal, because Parrot, you said that you were going to praise yourself, but Portal has been a remarkable series, and it is great to just consider that this is the first series. And just as Portal has been a doorway or a series of openings onto the lives and works of individual artists, onto history, and onto speculations about what's next, it is also a great form of placemaking. And one of the key concepts that we'll hopefully tease out in various speakers' contributions today is this strong contribution artists and cultural workers make to placemaking. And now is the time to really dig deep into some of these issues. So I'm looking forward. It'll be conversational. If you have a question, we'll take them in the chat room, and we've got a couple of key colleagues who are going to help with tech and administration of this particular session. I'm going to ask Stewart to kick off with us, specifically because Ashmore Arts really is a remarkable assembly of interdisciplinary practitioners who really can help lead the way in thinking through what is next for arts on the Surf Coast, but for the very active placemaking that Ashmore seems to specialise in. So Stewart, could we hand over to you?
Sure. Probably one of the first things I'd like to say is that I really believe in this industry going forward, and I have a word for you, and it's called SCAPE, which is Surf Coast Arts and Innovation Precinct. I would see in the future somewhere between Geelong and Torquay about 500 acres dedicated to the arts and innovation going forward. I think the timing's right. 100 years ago, they started building the Great Ocean Road. 50 years ago, 3 guys started to build a surfing industry. So I think it's probably time that we have a little look at the arts industry.
I think that there needs to be very serious consideration given to the allocation of land and space, escape, for that very kind of development. I'll be interested to hear from people, and I'm interested to hear from you, Stewart, in relation to what's happening on the Surf Coast in terms of urban development, what the impact of that is, or how that conditions the arts workers at Ashmore. What effect is it having, and how are people responding to it?
Urban development is directly reflective of the price of land down here, which is outrageously expensive. So what we find is that people will use our studios instead of a 3rd or 4th bedroom sort of thing. That's kind of one of, oh, okay, sorry, no, it's come back. So we provide extra space for people to operate their business from. And of course, when they come, you have like-minded people and everything runs according to plan. Everyone gets invigorated, and yeah, it's really quite a select group of people who actually push for a studio. They move in, and yeah, it's reflected in the works that they do, because they're all professionals, and it's great.
And are they long-term tenancies or?
Absolutely. So the majority of people pretty much stay for as long as their, I suppose, practice evolves. Someone like Mark has been there for pushing 15 years now. Jeff has been there for about 6. And so what we try and do is accommodate the growth of those businesses. So our priority when we build a new studio or shed is to offer it to an expanding practice, arts practice within, before we get someone else come in. So yeah, it works quite well.
I think one of the things that I know for the benefit of the audience and people who are joining us, it won't surprise you to know that the panelists and I've had an opportunity to speak prior to this particular session.
Sure.
But Stewart, a really important point that you raised in a previous conversation with us was about economic benefit of these businesses to local community. And one of the things that we're delving into today is the value that is placed on arts and culture. And we're constantly asked to demonstrate economic benefit in our activities, but what is the real impact in terms of Ashmore's outputs?
Well, in some numbers, there's 28 artists there. There's about 36 staff, which is direct employment, local employment, and of course, all the offshoots of that, tourism, velocity of money, etc., etc. So we got asked about 2 months ago by a university to actually come up with a number that what we contribute to GDP. So I actually sat down for about half an hour, and this is based on, I suppose, personal discussions, truck movements, employees, and just, you know, sort of what you get the feel of. This could be a couple of $100 grand either way, but the number is 2,916,000. And that is the contribution just from a tiny little arts place in Torquay. The upside of that is it's absolutely endless. And yeah, so to measure output and be able to talk to people like the council and institutions is really imperative for going forward, because they have to understand the economic benefit and in the long term, the cultural benefit, because the art is the enduring sort of stuff.
No, I mean, it's hugely important. And there are so many studies underway at the moment. I mean, we've all lived through various levels of government's responses to arts and creative industries as COVID-19 impacts have been, you know, unfolding. So there are a number of studies and reports and inquiries underway. You hit on a really important topic, and that is a condition that we need to be able to speak the language of economic development and demonstrate economic impact and benefit of our activities. But the important thing that I sometimes feel is difficult to get across is that arts and culture and the value of what creative practitioners do can't be measured in conventional accounting. The effects can be cumulative, they can take time to impact, but the reality is economic benefit must be demonstrated, and that's a remarkable outcome for Ashmore. That's an incredible demonstration that should immediately transform local government's sense of what creative practitioners on the Surf Coast are doing and can potentially do to lead recovery and change in that environment.
Putting it in their language and getting them to understand that it is viable is absolutely imperative. We had an interesting thing the other day. The farmer over the valley came over because he had an issue with his sheep, and that's all good. And he drove in and he went, "Oh my God, I thought there was about 3 of these and there's about 30 of them." Sort of, that was his words. He didn't really understand the, I suppose, the gravity or the fullness of the demand of, you know, for arts and all the rest of it. But one of, I suppose, my biggest achievements in convincing privileged white older males that are educated that perhaps there's a better system is the guys next door are looking at putting in studios. Now, these are an old established farming family, great people, and they've seen the growth of Ashmore Arts, and they came up to me about 18 months ago and said, "Hey, can we have a chat about doing studios?" And I went, "I think that would be great. You know, I'm into building an industry. Let's do it," sort of thing. So they've put an application into the council. So to be able to convince the old guard to have a different look is just fantastic. And for them to accept it and move with it is really great.
Yeah, I mean, it's so many of these, I mean, it goes to the point of the marketing of these extraordinary places and the promotion of the work that's being done and the outcomes. What happens in terms of that marketing space and promotion space for Ashmore?
Marketing, like into the future, or just in general?
Just in terms of, just in general, like, how do people know about it? If it, like you said, the farmers thought there were 3, but there were 30, and is it a hidden gem, or does it need more promotion?
No, we don't need any more promotion, thank you. We have 18 people on a waiting list, and I still can't keep up.
Yeah.
So one of the designs very early on in the piece was, it's all about this language, and it needs to be profitable. It needs to be accessible. I don't want to go through a system where I have to advertise all the time. So incumbent on me to make a business model that attracts people by default. And so that's what we did right from the outset. We've never advertised, and we're full. We're generally about 136% full. So that's why when people come to the arts trail, they just get absolutely blown away, not necessarily by the place, but by the quality of the art and the people there, and how sort of invigorated they are.
I'm looking at this slide, Byron Arts and Industry Estate, which I've visited many times over years.
Yep.
Is Ashmore based around that model?
No, not at all. I don't know much about the Byron Arts sort of estate sort of setup. I know it was done about pushing 50 years ago or something like that. The only thing that I know is they've run out of space and they don't have too much tree canopy cover. But I think this model of the Byron Arts is very repeatable down here in a scape, sort of like Surf Coast Arts Innovation sort of thing. But pick up on their mistakes, make it bigger, make it more future-proofed, and plant more trees.
Yeah, I mean, Byron has sort of squeezed it into a very confined space now.
Yeah. So
we might keep sort of, in the interest, if anyone has a comment from the panel to Stewart, feel free, but we might just sort of keep moving through. Stewart, is there anything else you want to say about Ashmore before we move on to Geoffrey?
No, fine. We'll get to it.
I've just got one comment, which is, Ashmore is a place for makers, and it is not open to the public. As far as the marketing you mentioned, then it could be something in the future if there was a gallery or cafe or something that made it open to the public, then that's when the marketing could come in. But like Stewie said, no more marketing at this stage, because he's just full to the brim with people wanting that space.
Yeah.
And it's important to have space for artists to work with other artists and learn and support each other.
Yes.
I think that community, that aspect of interdisciplinary community is hugely important. I think I was wondering about that level of public exposure to the makers or for the makers, but they're running businesses, so they don't, not necessarily the space for sort of people to be just cruising through gawking.
No, it's not a retail sort of
outlet
at all. It's all commercial space. People come in because they're busy. They need commercial premises, and they expand. Which is
the value of the cross-disciplinary skills is amazing. Geoffrey, it's great to see you, and a typically beautiful slide of your work.
Yes.
Can you reflect on your experience of Surf Coast and some of your views on its future?
Well, the Surf Coast is an incredibly creative area that sort of attracts creatives, but it's something to do with the horizon, I think, and forward thinking. So, and space to think. So it's important to really consider where the Surf Coast is going, because it doesn't currently have a physical embodiment of that creativity. It's there's nothing that really indicates that there's a creative hub there, or that creativity is celebrated. And that's probably due to the way it's developed over time. But moving forward, I think there's so much scope for a very strong engagement in public art to really showcase the importance of creativity and affirming the role of imagination, and particularly the way that the Surf Coast has become very family orientated. It's like a great way to engage with the public and show the tourists that there's something worth investigating further.
Absolutely. Yep.
You mentioned this sort of physical embodiment. I mean, we all know how much hard work Harriet and her team do, but given what's happening on the Surf Coast in terms of development, and there is a funding stream now for a library and cultural centre.
Yes.
But what about advisory? What about the embodiment of a key group now, and some form of advisory panel at this pretty critical juncture in the development of the Surf Coast, so that, as you say, there's a strong embedded program of arts and culture that doesn't get sideswiped by development.
Well, I think that's crucial. Like everything in Torquay, it's always tended to be governed by a bunch of very enthusiastic individuals that then open it up and things roll and develop and become more of a community event. So like having a strong arts advisory committee is crucial. Obviously creative agencies such as Authority Creative, Juddy Roller and Form have fulfilled that gap in other parts, and they've, like, for instance, public art, murals, sculptures, and particularly the silo projects, they were spearheaded by creative agencies. And now they've really captured the public's imagination. There's no better way to really get the public on board than doing public art, because it's in their face and it's something they can respond to in a very honest and open way. No one's telling them what they should think about it. They can form their own opinions as they move past it and create a relationship to it. And there's a lot of wow factor in public art. It creates instant placemaking and draws in a crowd. So, I mean, Torquay is a place that people come to for its natural beauty. So there's, this slide here, so the power of public art to draw a crowd. This is the Perth Mural Festival. And that's one point I wanted to speak to, was about the ability for Torquay to host large street art festivals, something that can really engage people and create tourisms outside of this traditional tourist summer crowd. So
yeah, well, I mean, cultural tourism is something that we're talking about in some depth here in Geelong at the moment, and it has huge potential. I mean, you made a really interesting point about the potential for these kinds of public art projects and festivals, etc. You said to link fractured town planning. I think that's a really important point. But also the driver of these, enigmatic, exciting public art projects, they are draw card events, they do change people's experience of the place.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, people come to Torquay and there's beaches, but what else is there? And there's a huge creative hub. So Torquay should really invest in that and showcase it and be proud of it. There's such a wealth of talent that's just sitting here waiting to be showcased. Certainly my experience in painting murals is it gets everybody on board, and people take ownership of it. Tourists love to come and see it and photograph it, and it has its own inherent tourist potential. But people that live in the location, it's a physical manifestation of the importance or the importance that we as a culture place on art. So if it's celebrated, particularly for youth engagement, there's it affirms the fact that imagination is celebrated and is rewarded.
As Surf Coast, I mean, I'm interested from all of you, as Surf Coast residents, I mean, do you see a space evolving for arts and culture to be, not centralized within one location, but is there an opportunity that you can see for this sort of embodiment of people and a place now to be developed? I mean, is that what the cultural centre is going to achieve?
Well, one of the key reasons I mentioned street art is because we've got the physical real estate already. There doesn't need, as important as it is to have a museum or library space, cultural bricks and mortar, street art is it's already got its space, you can reintegrate existing structures, and that's where you get that thread through the fractured town planning, from the industrial estate through old Torquay, new Torquay, all of that. It can all have art in that location, and it can create traffic zones through there. So
it's the will of the other partners. It's a bit like, you know, the farmers beside Ashmore, you know, wanting to help achieve this. I mean, clustering is the new black, as everyone's beginning to say. I mean, nothing can happen in isolation anymore. That street art program that you're talking about, I mean, there must be willing partners in terms of the sheer scope of urban development and the opportunities for sites and you know, transformations of place.
Well, yeah, I mean, for a prime example is what happened with the Wall to Wall Festival up in Benalla. It took a small regional centre and created a cultural hotspot that people flock to every year. It's that's a phenomenon in itself.
It is a phenomenon, and it's too glib to say build it and they will come, or paint it and they will come, but people do. And in fact, there is a very strong argument for local economic development in arts and culture projects, because I think we all know we're going to be spending our tourist dollar locally rather than sort of internationally. And so there's the cultural economy that artists can create and contribute to is going to be more important than ever.
Well, certainly with the Silo Art Trail, it increased international visitation by 30%.
Wow.
Specifically to come and look at the world's largest outdoor gallery. So
yeah, amazing.
Mm.
Is there anything else you want to say at this point before we continue through some panelists and then open up for some broader discussion?
Not particularly. Yeah, there's. I mean, I could go on. Although I'm talking about using what already exists in Torquay and sort of updating it and creating that a pathway throughout Torquay using artwork. The manifestation of a strong cultural precinct that's government funded is also very important, because that's taxpayer dollars being spent. And well, it's like as a society here, we also place an importance in art. So that's really important for the youth as well, growing up. So there's more than surfing, there's more than sport. Creativity is also rewarded, and it's held as a cultural foundation.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes frustrating to have to constantly assert and reassert the value of arts, heritage and culture. And in fact, the artists, all of you, the artists, the makers who, you know, from one generation to the next have to sort of continually, you know, reassert the argument that, you know, art matters and that it is something that enriches people's lives. There's a level of exhaustion that attends that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the development of the new cultural centre and what offshoots of that might be.
Yeah, once that's set up, it's like, it's just going to keep evolving, and that can be like the baseline, and we can only build from there. So at the moment, there's no real baseline. You know, that's where we have to establish it. So.
Yeah, well, and it would seem to me, as someone who doesn't live on the Surf Coast but spends time down there, that now is the time. It's a critical juncture in what's happening to the environment down there. And on that note, I might move to an artist whose work is so deeply connected to the environment, and Mark Trinham. Mark, could I ask for your reflections on your working context on the Surf Coast and your ambitions for the future there?
Yeah, well, look, I guess this next slide is very relevant to what Geoffrey and you, Jason, were just talking about, of, you know, the needing for art space. You know, a lot of these, the creation of things like Cowrie Market, for example, is to get arts out into the public. And because there has been a lack of venues, we've been working, you know, I've been working with people for the last 30 years to set up arts councils, to get the installation of an arts officer into council to try and get things happening. We had 30 years ago, we had a community art gallery that was run by artists, but over time, you know, the things like Carry Market and Nightjar Festival have been really incredibly popular because we need to gather as artists and arts appreciating community to have places we can storytell and to share our knowledge. And, you know, we've got the ability to mentor, you know, the next generation. You know, so many young artists are reinventing the wheel all the time, but we really need these places, and we really need a variety of places. Obviously these events are great, but you know, we have such terrible weather here, and we know from festivals that have been blown out and waterlogged, and you know, we really need a variety of venues that can be weather protected, that can house great artwork, that can facilitate workshops, that can have advisory committees working in these places, whether they be educational facilities. You know, we can really see the need for this, and it, you know, we've been crying out for it for a long time. So there is such a wealth of and volume of artists here to make that happen. So that's my thumbs up for creating multiple venues. Now, I guess your question about working with the environment, that's my passion. You know, I work. I'm a professional artist. 100% of my income is derived from the arts, and the story is still, for me, the story is still the same. It's bringing the attention to the natural environment, but I do it in so many different ways. Now, there's a few, and I guess the reason I can survive financially and satisfy myself and feel that I am walking the talk, then, you know, I've learned to be diverse and flexible in the types of art that I create. Now, we're going to flick through a few slides just to show the diversity. Like, for example, this project, working with Regional Arts Victoria, there's some arts bodies out there that are great to connect with. So this is, you know, storytelling and using opportunities to get art into the public place where there may not be the opportunities to create permanent art, but this was a temporary piece of art that we created 20 years ago at the Anglesey River mouth, and it was created with 120 surfboards and a whole lot of wetsuits, just to create what I felt was a bit of a spirit and, you know, surfers' connection to the environment in this area. If we go to the next slide, we'll look at working with, this is a project I work with at a school. So there's, you know, opportunities where you work as an artist, also as a storyteller, but as an educator. You can teach the skills of creating art. You can teach the skills of telling stories. You can get students involved in many ways. And also, of course, that creates an income for me to survive and continue my work as an artist. Go to the next one. Working with other facilities like the museum, the Melbourne Museum, also working in collaborations. This is one with Glenn Romanis. And again, just, you know, storytelling through art. We have such an ability to look at history here, and we have such an ability to look into the future and create a story of the future as well. Go through the next one. Working with function as an artist, like, you know, there's art in everything. You know, there's art in the clothes we wear and the cars we drive. There's creative people on board everywhere. This is where I would really like to see, and this is also through a great facility or advisory committee where there's marketing to actually promote the value of art and bring the value of art, of what it contributes to the community, but also the value of art as far as, in a financial sense, to support these artists who are great observers and they're great commentators of society.
Mark, that's a really important point, and I'm just reading a couple of Fred is making a comment that compared to sport, art is much less obvious to the public and is totally underestimated, which we know to be true. And it's about attitudinal change. He's saying nothing right or wrong with the comparison with sport, but it's important that the public rarely has an opportunity to understand the process of art making and only see the end result. And what you're talking about is embedding art and making in a range of everyday activities. Like those water fountains a minute ago were wonderful designs.
Yeah, that's right. There's obvious art for the general public see what they see as obvious art, and then there's like I said, the design can creep into all sorts of things, and it's important in the processes of developing anything, whether it's within Shire or whether it's in housing developments or whether in any industry, to engage artists at an early stage too, because how many times have us as local artists been invited to be interviewed by consultants that are working on different projects. Now, again, I come back to financially supporting artists and consultants who are getting paid to work on a project, but we'll pull in the artists to help come up with ideas and to, I guess, share their observations of that community and that society. It's important to value that, and we've got it all locally here. We can actually create that. I think I keep coming back to an artist hub where artists and creative thinkers can get together.
Councillor Rose Hodge, hi Rose, is saying that she was sure council would be guided by advisory group on the arts for its future development in Surf Coast. And your point about developers and artists, in my experience working with a number of artists over the years, the frustration is amplified when artists are asked at the last minute rather than being part of an embedded design process from the get-go. Artists are often asked to solve a problem at the end rather than design from the beginning. And again, that's a cultural and attitudinal shift that it seems to have success in some projects, but fails miserably in others. We're getting quite a few comments, but Mark, I'll keep going with you.
We'll flick through a couple more images too. That'll help. So yeah, again, using design and graphic design and sculptural skills to do interpretive signage, and these are seats in the public. Creating space. This is actually a memorial seat, so instead of having plaques or whatever, it's something that speaks to obviously the people that know why I did it, but it speaks to the general public. We'll keep moving through. It also art is, if we go back one, we also art in the private sector as well. It's not just public art, but art can tell stories and adorn people's houses. Art can be, a lot of the work I'm doing with Glenn Romanis in our business is working with playgrounds. So, nature play and bringing artists in on playgrounds. It wasn't happening 20 years ago, but we seem to be, it's sort of the bulk of our business now is working on public art spaces that are playgrounds.
Also, artists are in the business of seeing and compelling us to see. And so the opportunity to create such interactive spaces is quite remarkable. I just wanted to there's a massive respect for art too, because I almost every project I work on, people will say, "Oh, why do you bother?" Or it's just going to get vandalized, or people are just going to wreck this. But it doesn't happen. You can create a piece of playground or equipment or a seat or whatever, and it won't get touched, compared to something that's mass produced that doesn't quite have the personal soul that's gone into it. Speaking of respect, I'll just pick up on a key comment, because it goes to this idea of artists working in these public spaces of in any kind. A comment that consultants are paid, but artists are often asked for their advice for free, which is completely wrong. And there's another shift that needs to occur there too. It's about respect for the profession of artists and their expertise. I share that frustration, and it really needs to be addressed very clearly at the outset of every negotiation, because many artists and designers often ask for their advice for free.
That's right, and I know that the work that Glenn and I do with public art, it's such a better finished product if we can get there on the early stages, and we can work with landscape architects or architects and work with council to, what we love doing is trying to tease out what the story of that land is, what the spirit of that place is, and to bring that out, like you mentioned just before, we get brought in at the last minute to problem solve, or to what we call, plonk a piece of artwork in there to make something look a bit more beautiful. But to tell a story, it's so important, and we can be in there at a very early stage.
Yeah.
And we do that a lot. We've been working with landscape architects a lot, and things are evolving. What we're finding happens to a lot now is that landscape architects might come up with a design that's actually based on our previous work, and therefore say, hey, can you fabricate this? And then all of a sudden we have lost any sort of design fee, or we've lost that process. We'll actually, often go back and say, hey, no, we need to redesign this because it's missed the mark. So I think people are starting to actually understand the importance of getting artists in at the development stage and the early in on the concept stage.
And certainly, an emerging form of advisory committee for the Surf Coast region can embed some of those principles. Have you got?
Yeah, that's right. And an arts hub that's got arts management. As individual artists, we all have to go out and get our own insurances. And we've got young artists that say, "Where do I get insurance from?" And what's the best insurance? And you, for example, as a public artist, you go to an insurance company to get a public art insurance, and they say, "Well, what box will we put you in? Will we? Well, are you in the construction industry, or are you a stonemason, or are you a metal fabricator, or whatever?" And you can't get, we can't be put in those boxes. So it's a lot of work in the administration side of things to run an arts business. And Glenn and I have got a company set up. I've also, I work as a sole trader. I'm involved with different markets and events, and also a musician. So there's all these different entities. We all have to have multiple insurances, and all the legalities, and all your tickets to work on different machinery and things like that. There's so much across the arts industry that we're all trying to discover this on our own. It would be great to have a sort of an advisory body that can help cut through this and share the information that all these artists have got.
Helen will have a view on that when we get to her, but I mean, certainly here in Geelong, there's been a bit of movement on the board of Creative Geelong, a great volunteer organisation that are sort of trying to galvanise some of the local practitioners and help in this very area. Yeah. Mark, will we continue with you, or come back and move on to Daniela? I'm just looking at the time at the time. Daniela, you're doing some interesting collaborative work at the moment on the Surf Coast, and I wondered if you might reflect on that and your own experience of Surf Coast and your ambitions for the future.
Well, I guess what I can sort of talk about is another form of work that is being created that isn't so commercially viable, as in it's not for sale. There is, sort of works, more community-inspired works that that need time and development and investigation, and they are often it's often hard to get funding to do work like that. It's often hard to explain to organisations that you need money to survive while you work on these projects, rather than just, I'll take a photo and sell it on the website. It's more sort of more educative, more sort of work that tells stories. So I think that sort of goes back to this cultural centre, this new a space where artists can show the work and have the space to develop. have the space to investigate stories, tell the stories of the community, and have a backdrop to showcase this work, to engage new audiences, to engage the community with the stories of the place they live in, and of other places as well. Yeah.
I mean, storytelling, as so many of these portal sessions have demonstrated, becomes such an important grounding activity for people's connection to their place. And it seems that Surf Coast is in this incredibly vibrant position now to ensure that arts and culture is absolutely not just evident, but essential to daily activities. And a new centre and a new embodied group of artists and practitioners will certainly help make more commonplace the very storytelling that artists and makers specialise in.
And also, I think to sort of create a new identity for the Surf Coast. I've only lived on the Surf Coast for about 5 years, and when I moved here, I was actually quite surprised to find a really vibrant arts community. But you have to look for it.
Yes.
It's not really evident, and I'm sure that many visitors to the Surf Coast, to Torquay, aren't aware of such a vibrant community exists just down the road at Ashmore, or living down the streets of Torquay or Anglesea. It's very it's a hidden gem, and I find that it hasn't really been explored to tap into all that creative energy for to bring visitors here. I think there's a lot more to explore and showcase.
This is what is important about this portal series, because it has revealed so much from one artist to another, from one audience to another. I mean, it is a remarkable accumulation of perspectives and revelations on what is happening on the Surf Coast, and it's a hugely inventive form. But for me, having gone through the sessions, what Portal is now absolutely affirming and is in fact providing a foundation for is the permanence and presence of arts and culture on the Surf Coast. Portal has created a place from which everything should now flow, because so many artists have contributed to the series, as the people are doing now. And I know that there are great organisational bodies down there that I feel would be very, very receptive to what artists want and need. I mean, there's such drive amongst creative industries on the Surf Coast. It's remarkable.
Yeah, but I also think that there are so many different types of artists and genres, and sometimes artists are all lumped into one group, like that. It's all just fine art, or it's all artists just need a space to put their work up. But it's I think it needs more development. I think art needs to be nurtured, and there needs to be more funding for that, for artists to network and to have a place to explore ideas. And it's more than just having a place to put your work up. I think there's more to art than just exhibiting.
Mark made that point, that it's not just about piling artists into one location, multiple hubs, multiple centres, because people have different disciplines, different practices, and they are. And I love interdisciplinarity. I love the fact that people sort of share, collaborate, and creativity evolves before our very eyes as professions merge and share expertise. I mean, I love it and I see it and we work with it here. So Mark's point about having multiple hubs is a really important one, I think.
Yeah, really explore the diversity of artists, you know, and the diversity of expression, and even to create new audience, to engage new audiences. You know, I think I go to a lot of exhibitions along the Surf Coast and openings, and there is a lack of diversity in the audiences, and I think maybe if we had more spaces to exhibit and to exhibit a wider range of artists, then we could have develop different audiences, engage younger people, engage more of the people that aren't seeing what they are interested in.
Yeah, or what they're used to. I mean, it's not a homogenous form. I mean, and diverse specializations require different contexts in which people work and the work can be seen. I'm noting too that a comment from Faye about the Lawn Biennale and Sculpture Biennale and Artist Trail is really important. Long established arts experience that every lawn sculpture biennial is a real struggle for funding, and the commitment of individuals to that particular form has been remarkable. Danny, I'll just leave that there, and I think to sort of go to Helen Gibbins, who, among other things, as Harriet mentioned, is the current president of Surf Coast Arts Inc. Helen, what we're talking about must be of special significance to you and the people with whom you're working at Surf Coast Arts. Could you offer some reflections?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a fairly new resident to the Surf Coast. I've only been here just over 3 years, and one of the first things I did was to try and seek out what was happening in the region, and I joined Surf Coast Arts as a member a couple of years ago. And a year after, we're going through a big transition stage at the moment. It's been around for 26 years, and Mark touched on that earlier. So very quickly, I sort of found myself as president as of November last year. We had a workshop in March just to start talking about what that transition might look like. And one of the strongest things that came out of that was, building that advocacy to be a body of individuals as an official kind of body, to build advocacy and to develop that collective voice through encouraging a Shire Arts Advisory Committee, as has already been mentioned, but also just the potential for Surf Coast Arts to be a much more significant body, and for having that voice is very much there. I'm also really interested in lobbying to embed a creative framework to inform also all levels of decision making in federal and state government. I mentioned this yesterday, and I'm just going to mention it again. Harriet and her team put together the Creative Places strategy in 2019, which links into the objectives of the council plan. And I worked in local council for 6 years up until last year in admin for the community development and advocacy area. And it was the first time that I really realised and understood how a council plan works and how the strategies that are set up within that document inform how the council is going to work for the next 4 years. Now, we've got a fantastic opportunity. The new council plan will be drafted next year, and this portal program, as Jason has reflected on, is a fantastic foundation to start building that momentum, and I believe Surf Coast Arts can help with that too. And that means bringing people on board who, like yourselves, who are passionate about building the creative industry and passionate about creating that living history and sharing those stories. one of the easiest ways to do that is by redeveloping the Surf Coast Arts website and having that as a real online hub for collecting all of these stories, for having information about professional development, to have connections for mentoring and nurturing within that professional development. Yeah, there's lots of things that we can do, and I think
it's a great place to start that website redevelopment, because
absolutely
we've all seen, you know, how our lives have changed through online, you know, work and experience, and it must be the place to start.
And it's been coming out of conversation today already. Where is that place where all of this information and resources can be stored and accessed and promoted? And that can absolutely be Surf Coast Arts. And then working in tandem with an arts advisory body with council, because Surf Coast Arts is independent, even though for 23 years with Julie Dyer at the role of arts officer, there was a very, very strong, close connection with council. So quite a few things were able to be achieved. So, you know, we need to build that again. And
where does the funding come from, Helen?
We don't receive any government funding.
Wow.
The Kauri market has been an income source, and there's a very, very low, I think it's, you know, $10 to be a member, but that model needs to be kind of redeveloped as well. So I was going to be reaching out, you know, to everybody from after our meeting in March, and COVID just put a stop to that for a lot of reasons personally. So Portal has helped to reinvigorate that, and yeah, it's a really exciting time, and these conversations are evident of that.
They certainly are. Is there any further reflection from any of the panelists on anything that Helen's touched on in terms of Surf Coast Arts?
Yeah, we were just talking the other day about the Kauri market and the future of Kauri market with COVID, and you know, in the short term, we're looking at starting the market season but going online. So looking at what can be done online with entertainment, with information about makers and artists and producers and recipes, and you know, all those sorts of things that could come in context, so people can be still purchasing online and still supporting these makers, these local makers that are struggling at the moment because they've lost one of their greatest avenues of selling their work and getting their produce and works out there. So that will be interesting. I think that's something that could be grown as well. You know, it's a little bit like a community radio station or a community TV station that, you know, offers another alternative to, you know, mainstream television or radio, that whether it's through a website or whether it's through certain things like just, you know, Portal has been a great example of what can happen live, and just grow it from there.
I just want to clarify a couple of things. You know, it's my poor preparation. I'm sorry. I might have jumped the gun, and I've probably alarmed every councillor on this panel or listening to this panel. Council has resolved to pursue the development of the library and cultural facility as a key objective for the next decade, and identifying funding is the next step. But you know, and we're in the same boat here in terms of our expansion. There's another key question too around organisations like Geelong Galleries and any other sort of museum and local government authorities' sense of the value of local artists for their collections. And I just want to quickly sidestep and say that we do in fact collect local artists' works when we can, in line with all of our other acquisition policies. But COVID-19 has, and I'll be transparent about this, has caused us to reflect very deeply on what's next for our level of commitment to local artists and the profiling of work in through the exhibitions program, artist engagement across the board. We're out there and we're doing it, but we can see that there might be opportunities for a stronger representation of Geelong and G21 region, Surf Coast, Cola, Otway, wherever artists, because the gallery is not just about Geelong, it's about the region. So it's a good point. It's one I'm always happy to talk about. And the collection is a living collection, and we're constantly looking at local work. But maybe just as we're talking about the future of the Surf Coast, Geelong is also talking about its future in terms of arts, heritage and culture. So it's a very exciting time. I think we sort of, it's full of potential. That's the great thing about it.
Can I offer something?
Yes, please.
I think that whole potential, not only just for the Geelong region and the Surf Coast, but nationally and internationally. And I think it would be wonderful if the Surf Coast Shire funded a second arts officer position to go and explore the external opportunities with bringing an industry to town. So you get someone like Harriet, who's very comfortable in that position of ice breaking, and to go out, seek shows, state, federal funding, international opportunities to bring tours and shows through, and just to basically start operating as an industry on a world map instead of just internally with community and struggling sort of arts bits and pieces. We can get a format in place and really build over the next 20 to 50 years.
That's a really important point, Stu, and I think that we underestimate just how much work arts and culture units in local government actually produce. Yes. And are asked to do. And I know from long experience in the visual arts, both working in institutions and for different levels of government, that the resourcing of arts and culture units can be problematic. I'm not addressing this to the Surf Coast at all. It's across the board, and yet they are asked to make places and to help define places for people's experience on a shoestring.
Yes, very, very true. But I think if you can expand a whole industry in general, things just start dropping from that. And if the council can have a look at, I'm not saying this has to be done, I'm just saying I believe there's an opportunity here, the tide's turning. How about having a look and going, if we can get in front of this, maybe we can make it better for everybody involved. And yeah, it's really worth looking at.
Yeah.
Are you going to say something then, or Geoffrey?
Oh yeah, certainly it has a lot of scope to be showcased internationally down here.
Oh, without a doubt.
It already has an international audience every year with the Bells contest and all of that. People flock to this area from all around the world. It's on the tick list of places to come. So,
and don't underestimate the power of the Great Ocean Road. I mean, they come flooding for it.
Absolutely.
So
and also to remember, and you brought this up before, Jason, thanks to someone messaging about the sculpture biennial and the arts trails. But we do have other little hubs within the Surf Coast. This is a very Torquay centric talk, which is built on from the MAC conversation yesterday. And so it's interesting that Torquay doesn't have a hub, but there's in Deans Marsh, there's the recent project which is Spark, working with the Sports and Recreation building there and the festival. Of course, there's Kudos Arts, which is a private enterprise in Lorne, and Eagle's Nest, which is also a private enterprise in Aries. All very different models, all doing very different things, but as a collective voice, really important.
Sally is asking panelists whether they have any advice for MAC as they're writing their management plan. Maybe that's something that could be pursued in a little more depth with some one-on-one engagements.
On what sort of plan, sorry? What
MAC, Sally's writing to the panelists, what advice would the panelists have for the committee of the Multi-Disciplinary Arts Centre as they write their management plan?
Oh, the management plan, right? Yep.
Also,
well,
flexibility.
I saw that Faye was mentioning the Shire having a collection of art as well, just like Geelong collects contemporary art from throughout the ages. Imagine if the Surf Coast did invest in every year getting one piece of artwork. That would be something I'd be really interested to see.
Yeah, I mean, I can't answer this question. Does the Shire have a collection at all? Harriet might be able to answer that.
We do have a small collection. It's actually, and it's, particularly considering the entire sort of Shire offices have been closed down, it's sort of in various places around there. But I absolutely agree, sort of the building of that collection and also some sort of looking back into that collection. What is there? Why is it there? How has it come to be? That same sort of history sort of mapping that we've done through Portal into things like that. Because absolutely, Jason, when we talk about a cultural facility, the fact that we can't, that we're not able to go and look at the work that's been created in this part of the world. Something that I, always have in my brain is I spent a long time living in Alice Springs, and there's a phenomenal art award there called the Alice Prize, which has a significant cash prize, which makes it really worthwhile to artists to enter. But that receives, I curated that about 15 or 20 years ago, and we had more than 360 entries from throughout Australia. So they've got Mary Martin in the collection, obviously some of the biggest names in Indigenous art, etc., and that's through an acquisitive prize. And it means that their Arts and Cultural Centre has an extraordinary collection that really talks about, the themes in Australian history over the last 25 years, etc. So I'm totally with you there. We need a good benefactor for the prize money.
It's important. I mean, there's been a painting prize in Geelong Gallery since the 1930s. And so that prize, awarded every 2 years, has in fact built a remarkable, in fact, an outstanding collection of Australian painting that tells our story of Australian painting across the 20th century and into the 21st century. And it's a $30,000 prize. That's a help every 2 years for artists. The idea of the collection is really important. And I mean, I don't find myself needing to be an apologist in these sorts of situations, but I do want to assert that my eyes are constantly sort of open to change in collection development here. And maybe this is sort of an opportunity for regional galleries like ours and others, and Victoria's rich in them, as we all know, to just have a think about the representation of local and regional artists in the collection. These are important questions, and we're meant to lead in this space, and that rethinking is an important part of that, because it's not, Geelong is not Torquay and Torquay is not Geelong, but there needs to be very strong interactivity between all of our communities.
Absolutely. The expertise that you can offer, even on this panel and through Portal, is phenomenal. I mean, when Harriet suggested that you should be the moderator, I just went, oh my God, this is great.
You wouldn't think the way I've garbled some of my sentences this morning.
Okay, it's that coffee.
Are there any questions coming through from the chat room? People have been great on the and Sally from Mac, if there's any sort of planning documentation or support that we might offer you from Geelong's sort of vast reservoir of plans, we're very happy to share anything with you. So you could get in touch with me via the Geelong Gallery website if we can help in any way, because we're writing all the time.
Sorry, I think too that the MAC opportunity is great in the short term to get something up and running. Like we've been talking for the last 30 years since the formation of Surf Coast Arts about needing venues and needing space. So if the Library and Cultural Centre takes another 10 years, that's going to be 40 years that we've been working to have this space. And a lot of people have been working on that and getting a bit tired. And so, and a space to reinvigorate and certainly to house. Something we haven't touched on is talking about the future is the youth. A lot of youth and places where they can learn from mentors. You've got a wealth of mentors and people that have been through this and created their careers and have got opportunity to pass on that information before we all, disappear or get tired of it or go into our, secluded studios or whatever happens, whatever plans we have for the future. It's important to have these spaces, and as much as support as sport has been supported throughout the region and always has. You know, I was working on projects years ago, especially out at Lara with the at secondary schools where there was, you know, high youth suicide, and you know, money was being put into sports facilities, but there's a whole section of the community, youth community, that either, you know, not interested in sport or they don't find it's their thing that they excel in. We need diversity in these sectors. And I just want to reinforce my views of in strengthening and enlarging the arts and culture aspect of Shire, because they're not only working with other departments in council and having to get the artist voice across to other people and other issues, but they're also trying to do that throughout the Shire in various industries outside of council. So it's important. I think that just needs to be strengthened.
I think one practical and the way to strengthen it on a practical level is to put human resources into arts and culture in the Shire, because it can't just be one or two people. Sorry, both Helen and Danny were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say that, and I think it's really great that Surf Coast Arts is thinking about taking more of an active role in advocating for artists, because I'm really for artists being in the on these panels and committees making the decisions. But I really do understand that sometimes it's hard for artists to be part of the conversation, because it takes time from them creating or, you know, doing all the multiple other jobs that they have to do to survive. So for a body like Surf Coast Arts to take the lead and speak on behalf of us, I think it's, you know, it's great. It's great.
Danny. And one of the most important things for everybody is to step up. Both MAC and Surf Coast Arts and a potential arts advisory body for the Shire need that range of skills. And a lot of these things are often driven by artists who have a skills base. But if you love the arts and are really good at marketing, social media, if you're really good at finance, at advocating, then definitely step up and get in touch with myself at Surf Coast Arts, through Harriet at the Shire, and Danny and the team through MAC. And you know, these are good foundation groups to get this going.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to call it. Yeah, step up. That's right. I mean, what more can you say? There's some really interesting points coming through. Fred's just said something, and this goes to what Mark's talking about in terms of the long length of time it takes to get things off the ground, and the other thing that we've all been reflecting on, which is the sheer state of change in the way we're receiving and collating information in this COVID-19 context online. Fred says, in the age of digital media, how does one hardwire creative art into the next generations? The need for creation rather than consumption is quite a challenge. That's a really important point.
I'd just like to speak to that, the fact that digital content needs to be created, and digital creation, normally it's a physical act that then gets documented. So creativity, if anything, is flowing more freely than it previously used to.
It sure is, yeah.
I'd just like to say too that we're talking about the MAC and Surf Coast Arts being a platform to get things up and running, and we need more people on it. But they are run by volunteers, and like to talk about what Danny mentioned too about how artists, professional artists that are mostly involved with these projects are trying to juggle their professional careers, their incomes, their families, their everything else, and also volunteering a lot of time into this. So yeah, I would be looking at seeking some sort of financial support as well.
Surf Coast Arts and MAC definitely strike me as next cabs off the rank right now for local government funding. Yeah.
Can I say, I think it's great that the council has now funded the MAC, but if they go into any detail and think that this is a worthwhile project or an industry or all things considered, if they as a council come out and just state their intent or label themselves as an art-friendly area council or whatever they're going to do, private investment will just flood into this Shire.
I agree. And that's what I was saying earlier about showing that a creative framework can be embedded into the next council plan.
Yeah, and something that's going to transition the four-year political cycle. So it's sitting there with the staff so it can just flow through. Yeah. It's going to take 10 or 20 years. Yeah. And that's okay, even though people don't like the long and the hard, but that's what it's going to take. And so if we can, as you say, Helen, embed that would be fantastic.
Not sure
and embedding it too, specifically because, as we know, that the cyclical change of council means that sort of plans can be, sort of shelved.
Yeah.
But Harriet, there's a new Geelong Arts and Culture Unit's working on a new creative strategy, arts and culture strategy, which should be out in the next sort of 12 to 18 months, I think. And is it correct that something's happening next year at Surf Coast, Harriet? Or
in regards to into the
creative strategy. Or was that last year? Sorry, that was
I did a creative places strategy last year, but it was an interim one for the 2 years leading towards the new council plan. And I completely agree with you, Helen, regarding looking at sort of embedding creative frameworks throughout. One of the things I think that Portal's been really successful at is sort of allowing council internally to hear your voices, and I will say that they are being heard. But of course, local government faces something that we're all really aware of in this area, and that arts funding has been cut more than 30% in the last decade, and the areas of government that have picked up the slack are local government. So it's a really, really fraught area. But I believe, look, we've had an incredible council so far. We're now in caretaker period, so we will have a new council come November. We've had a really art-savvy council, but we're a small region and, there's not a lot of money. So I think it really is about us harnessing the power of our people, of the arts sector, and, all fighting towards those bigger goals.
And the council did fund the prosperous places, so that'll come out next year as well. And
absolutely,
thanks to
Helen. It has been an art savvy council. They invited me down to speak to them, and it was a fantastic conversation.
They're good, and they so I really hope that the people who run for council, they really understand how significant our creative sector is here and how important. Jason, I just absolutely loved what you said regarding artists. They help us see, they compel us to see, and I think this conversation really is, because for some people art is in many ways, because it's product based, or so many people see it as a final product. In many ways, it's we don't understand sort of the way it acts as a glue, for bringing community together. And I think these sorts of conversations really help people understand the wide reach of it.
And I think also the conversations that Mark and Stu in particular have been able to share with us today, which is a much bigger picture and one that hasn't sort of really been in my focus of that creative industry. So really important conversations to be had there.
And also just to always remember that every creative industry is having an economic impact on community. Social impact, economic impact. I mean, and it goes back to some of the beginning comments. I think it's been a wide-ranging conversation. I think we're kind of about to wrap up. Is that about right, Harriet?
Yeah, that's right.
The other thing that's been wonderful is the sheer diversity of practitioners on the panel today. And Helen, going back to Mark's point about the volunteer role that people undertake, I was looking at that beautiful drawing of yours, and they don't happen overnight. So, practitioners need time to think, to make, and the fact that people are so committed to what's next for Surf Coast and working in these voluntary capacities, really organisational level, it's so important. So
I usually, have to work in an office job somewhere. I haven't been able to build a creative industry for myself yet. And, thanks to COVID in many ways for giving me some time to think about this stuff. And you know, I've probably got a few more months before I have to go back and get some work. So it's a brilliant time to start building that foundation.
Stu, do you want to say something to close off?
Well, the only thing I wanted to suggest was the arts as an industry is fantastic because it's low impact on the community, on the environment. It works well with it. And it just, as Harriet said before, it's a lot more glue in there than you think.
Mm.
We're not talking chemical plants here.
Yeah, it's a good point to finish on. Harriet, I might hand back to you to close off.
Thanks, Jason. Look, thank you so much to everyone for joining us today, both in the audience, but particular thanks to our panellists for sharing their considerable knowledge and expertise. What I find most apparent from today's session is the richness of the opportunity that's available to us here on the Surf Coast and the importance of the arts and creative thinking to the future development of our region. It's the artists and creators that help us develop new ways of relating to place, help us formulate regional identities that indicate who we are and what is important to us. And in this era of rapid development and with regional tourism as a key economic driver, this is vital to our ongoing prosperity. I'd really like to encourage everyone to join me this afternoon in conversation with the Float crew. You know, if we're talking about the ways that the arts can revivify and link large regions with small pockets of townships, etc., this is a perfect model for us. If you could join me this afternoon at 2 p.m. to learn how this amazing collection of environmentalists, artists, scientists, and economists came together to help invigorate their Far East Gippsland communities through an incredible array of arts, culture, and environmental action. So that's at 2 p.m. You can join us via Facebook Live, or you can register for the Zoom session via our website, www.surfcoastartstrail.com.au. I want to thank everyone finally for all of our audiences and everyone that's been involved in Portal over the last 3 months. As I said, this is the end of season 1, winter. So there's more sunshine. I encourage you to get outdoors and, be in our beautiful region. If you want to learn about some amazing walks, etc., do make sure you check out Miranda Jarvis's Walking with Artists series that's on Portal website. That's via the stories page, where she walks with artists and creatives from our region and gets them to talk to us about her practice, whilst at the same time photographing some of these beautiful, landscapes that we're so fortunate to have. So thanks for joining us. Remember, we're going to hand Portal over to you going forward. So think about your ideas. What would you like to be sharing with the community? What are the sorts of ideas that you'd like people to engage in? And reach out to myself and the Portal team. And we'll look forward to seeing you towards the end of the month with another fabulous Portal session. Jason, everyone, thank you.
Thank you, Harriet.
Amazing.
Thanks, Harriet.
Hopefully see you at 2 p.m.